Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope you're all well, healthy. Um, this Go Show, with its title White Horses and White Swans, will remind you of King Rinda and that letter we read some time ago. But I want to tell you right off the bat that I have a couple of pages marked here from previous research. White Horses and White Swans is in fact the story of King Rinda, but this Go Show deals directly with the Daimoku that we practice, the chanting, the Namu, the Myoho Renge Kyo, all the aspects of the Lotus Sutra, how it is practiced, what it means to chant those characters. So there's a lot of meat in this, and I think that you could use this Go Show as quite a launching vehicle for your study, especially if you're new to Buddhism, new certainly to Nichiren's Go Shows. This is one of many, but this one, with all those early questions we have, and even after you've practiced 30, 40 years, occasionally there's some new questions in our insights that apply to the characters of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, this Nichiren mandala of our Gohonzon. These questions reoccur as we expand our capacity to understand and manifest our Buddha mind, right? So you'll find there's a lot of discussion of the Daimoku in this letter, and really adds a lot of context for our understanding of our practice. So here we go. This letter is written to a woman, probably a woman of quite elevated means. She sends Nichiren a large sum of money, let's just say, with a dedication and a request for a memorial service for her deceased father. And she describes what she's been doing in the meantime as an honorarium and a practice of Nichiren's doctrine of the Lotus Sutra, how she's practicing. So there's great information about our practice in general. And Nichiren's response as to how she is practiced and so forth. So this is an interesting one that relates directly to our current practice. So let's get into it. In the letter you wrote from Atsubusa, you say that the 9th day of the 8th month will mark the 100th day anniversary of your father's passing, and that, as an offering, you present 10,000 coins with deep respect. In the declaration you sent for the memorial service, you say that you have read and recited the entire Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law once, the expedient means and lifespan chapters 30 times each, and the verse section of the lifespan chapter 300 times, and have chanted the Daimoku of Myoho Renge Kyo 50,000 times. In the same document, you say that you recall gratefully how, when your deceased father was still alive, you, my disciple, journeyed 1,000 ri over mountains and rivers to this distant place, receiving in person from me the Daimoku of the wonderful and difficult to understand law, and how less than 30 days later your father's life came to an end. Now, what does that mean? Specifically, you received from me the Daimoku of the wonderful and difficult to understand law. Now, there's a website and a society of people who've dedicated a tremendous amount of research on the extant Nichiren Mandalas. It's a Nichiren Mandala workshop, and you can look that up online. And they've published several books. I have some. That is beautiful to see all of these various mandalas that Nichiren created, all based on the Daimoku in the center and with iterations from very early on of different personages of the Lotus Sutra, the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. And it's entirely possible that this is what he's relaying, is that this woman of means traveled with her father to visit Nichiren in Minobu and bring gifts and so forth. And at the time that she and her father were there, he bestowed upon her some mandala, which is quite significant. So we can understand then that as she recited the Lotus Sutra and the Lifespan chapter and the Expedient Means chapter, and also chanted the Daimoku, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, that she had a mandala with which to express that practice. So a very early template, if you will, of the practice we do today. He continues, you say that although, alas, he has now become mere white bones in the dew garden of Jampudvipa, that although he has turned to dust and earth, you believe that his departed spirit will surely blossom into a flower of enlightenment in the land of Eagle Peak. Now, we've talked about these discussions on death and spirit being a mental function, right? The mind. Should probably remove the word spirit from these translations because that's still a religious bias that can confuse you. So please don't be confused by it. He continues, your declaration is signed, quote, respectfully yours, the woman disciple of the Onakatomi clan, 3rd year of the Koan era, 1280, end quote. When we consider the matter, we realize that although in India the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, the single vehicle, is so voluminous that it can fill a whole city 1 Johanna square, the versions that has been transmitted to Japan consists of only 8 volumes. In the past, there have been many examples of people who praying to or meditating to receive benefit in their present or future have achieved their desires by reciting and praising all 8 volumes, or merely 1 volume, or the Expedient Means and Lifespan chapters, or the verse section of the Lifespan chapter alone. I will say no more about these examples. It's interesting that he brings them up, and I wish he'd elaborate on that a bit. He has in other writings, not specifically in this way, but it's interesting that he identifies all these different versions of people's practice. Really speaks more to the individual needs and expressions of different people's path to enlightenment, which Shakyamuni spoke of all the time. Innumerable, immeasurable, uncountable, blah, blah, blah. One part of this statement that I found fascinating was the reciting and praising. I'm not sure how that's translated, but certainly reciting means what it says, reciting. But I think the praising part is part of our attitude toward what we're reading, our motive that we put to our practice. Is it just idle recitation? Is it just reading for the sake of reading? Or is it reading with a purpose, reading with an intent? Remember, Buddhism is all about that mental attitude and intent, right? So this is where it leads us to Namu, that presents the intent to our recitation of the Daimoku. So remember that as we go on here. In your declaration, you speak of reciting the Daimoku of Myoho Renge-kyo 50,000 times. And you've probably heard of Daimoku campaigns, and depending on which groups or organizations you've been with. And I've talked about it, where, simply chanting the Daimoku has some strength. Just like anything, if you're going to train to be a sprinter or a marathon runner, or if you're one to learn a programming language for computer sciences, the more time you spend on your study, the more insight you gain, the more facility you gain, the greater your understanding, so on and so forth. Well, studying Buddhism is no different. And so with that attitude, when we chant Namo Myoho Renge-kyo, we're not just making noise. We're trying to excel at our invocation of Myoho Renge-kyo to get us to our Buddha, right? So with that kind of motivation, that kind of will, we can gain much more from our Daimoku. So here we go. With regard to this statement, the 50,000 repetitions, I've tried to think of earlier examples of such practice, but they seem to be very few. Although there may have been some who recited this Daimoku once or twice and gained benefit, I've never heard of anyone who recited it 50,000 times. All phenomena have their respective names, and the name in each case indicates the particular virtue or property inherent in that thing. For example, the person known as General Stone Tiger was so called because he was capable of penetrating a stone tiger with an arrow. You may remember we talked about that story, simply because of his visualization and his intent being so strong. He thought he saw a tiger and shot an arrow at it to kill it or stop it with all of that intent, only to find after they got closer in the grasses and looked at the tiger that it was not a tiger but in fact a stone. And somehow, simply because of his volition, the arrow penetrated the stone as though it were a beast, an animal. That's it's a story, it's an illustration, but again, it's all about intent, attitude, will, right? The power of the mind. And the minister Target Piercing was given that name because he could shoot an arrow through a target made of iron. In both cases, the name indicates the qualities of the person. I think you can see where this is going. In the case of the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, the virtues and benefits of its 8 volumes and 28 chapters are all contained within the 5 characters that make up its title, Myoho Renge-kyo. It is like, for instance, the wish-granting jewel that contains 10,000 different jewels within it, another expedient means. This is what is meant by the doctrine that the 3,000 realms are all contained within a single particle of dust, or a single thought moment, right? The word Namu expresses feelings of reverence and a sense of compliance. And this is something I've tried to describe in our mental state when we chant our Daimoku to this Nichiren mandala to awaken our Gohonzon and our Buddha mind, right? Is that our intent is critical in achieving that. And to unclutter our minds, not like you would hear in other meditation disciplines, but to unclutter not intentionally. See, this is the great gift, the great mechanism, the great practice that Nichiren uncovers for us of Shakyamuni's teaching of the Lotus Sutra. That by having this mandala that Nichiren created, we can chant the title of the teaching, which indicates the entirety of the teaching, which is why you need to study. Because the more you study, the more you understand what is contained within the characters Myoho Renge Kyo. Follow? Now, with the intent in our chanting and this mirror, this device, this earthly device of this mandala, encapsulating the teachings of the wonderful law, the Lotus Sutra, which itself is the culmination of all Shakyamuni's teachings. You get the exponential qualification here. By chanting, we visualize, first of all, our mandala, our Gohonzon. We hear it. We focus our minds on the repetition and the clarity of the characters. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, not Myoho. That's worthless. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. You want to practice enunciating each character because each character has within it so much. The 84,000 teachings are in Myoho Renge Kyo. So you want to give them all room to be expressed. More to the point, as you focus on these formations in your mouth, in your larynx, in your head, in your mind, in your body, you will feel the breath, the vibrations, the knowledge, the depth of meaning, the teachings of this awakening of your Buddha. Well, with all of your senses, and in Buddhism, 9 consciousnesses, remember, all 8 of your earthly samsaric consciousnesses are now being engaged. Think about that for a moment, because if you truly understand that all those consciousnesses are now being wrangled into one moment of focus, whatever you were thinking in your samsaric mind about people, about struggles, about how sick people are in this latter age, how much greed, avarice, how much stupidity and manipulations and anger, all of that. We're all faced with that stress day in and day out. But this practice is not about that. It will result in affecting that, but that is not how you go about your practice. By focusing on each character, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, intently using the Myo character of this mandala to focus your eye consciousness, to hear with your sound consciousness, to feel the vibrations and the breathing of your chanting. This silences the monkey mind, the earth, the mundane mind of all those issues. So you may use those issues in order to sit yourself in front of your Butsudan and commit to this practice. That's what Nichiren talks about when he talks about earthly enlightenment. Our earthly desires are enlightenment, right? Not that they by themselves, in and of themselves, are enlightenment, but because they are the motive force that sits you in front and dedicates you, right, with reverence and compliance. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Therefore, the Venerable Ananda placed Namu above the two characters meaning this, for of this is what I heard, which he wrote at the beginning of all the sutras. The great teacher Nanhue employed the words Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, and the great teacher Tendai the words Keishu Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. See, Nichiren was not the first to say this. This is the title of the teachings. And within that title is contained the teachings, all of the teachings. So with that kind of depth of understanding, when we chant to this mandala to awaken our Buddha mind, we are sending the 84,000 teachings into our minds, the grandeur of that, the import of that is all encompassing of our awareness, our earthly mind. And all other concerns should be pushed out. You don't push them out with your earthly mind. You push them out with your dedicated, reverential compliance of practice by chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo with intent. Make this Namo Myoho Renge Kyo come alive. Let me be Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. With that kind of mind, you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. It's no longer there. You've silenced it. Do you see? You don't silence the monkeys by pointing them out. That's attachment. That's leaving you stuck there. Screw the monkeys. I'm doing this now. With your will, your volition, your attitude, your intent, all of them, they go away. There's no effort required other than your complete and utter focus on Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. This is when you'll experience your Buddhahood. This is when the Gohonzon, they will enliven, and that mandala of Nichiren will start to disassemble and become voluminous, and you will fuse with that Buddha experience. Now you're practicing, right? The Venerable Ananda, and why does he bring up Ananda? Because he was the first, in historical terms, to sit down with a panel of experts, Rahula and all the others that were the core of support around Shakyamuni, who were memorizing all of these teachings and put them down into written form. And each sutra, each sermon, was titled with Namu. This I have heard. This is my dedication. This is my resolve. Follow? And his earlier statement that the Lotus Sutra is so voluminous in India that you couldn't hold its writings in a city block or in a complete city. That's because the teachings of Myoho Renge Kyo, which Shakyamuni taught for about 8 years, consisted of many, many explanations of this sermon. And in point of fact, this sermon, Myoho Renge Kyo, the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law, is itself a culmination of all of Shakyamuni's teachings. And so, in a very real way, the contents of the Lotus Sutra are all of Shakyamuni's teachings, which itself could be a voluminous, unknowable volume of teachings. So, let's go on. The Venerable Ananda was the son of King Dronodana and a disciple of Shakyamuni Buddha. the Lord of teachings. 60 days after Shakyamuni passed away, Mahakashyapa and the other disciples, 1,000 persons in all, along with Manjushri and the others, 80,000 bodhisattvas, all gathered together in the great lecture hall to lament the passing of the Buddha. They conferred among themselves, saying, quote, "Even we, who attended upon the Buddha for so many years, lament our parting from him after only 60 days. What then of all the people who live 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, or in the latter day of the law? What means will they have to cherish his memory?" The 6 teachers of the non-Buddhist doctrines preserve the 4 Vedas and the 18 major scriptures that the 2 deities and the 3 ascetics preached and left behind 800 years ago, so that the words left by their teachers might be transmitted to later ages. Should we not likewise write down the various teachings that we have heard from the Buddha preached to the voice hearers and the great bodhisattvas over the course of 50 years, so that they may serve as an eye to the people of the future, which is us? So concurring, they invited the Venerable Ananda to ascend to the highest seat and looked up to him in reverence in the same way they would the Buddha, while they themselves sat in the lower seats. Then Bodhisattva Manjushri recited the words, "Namu Myoho Renge Kyo," and the Venerable Ananda, in response to this, replied, "This is what I heard." The 999 other great arhats then all dipped their brushes in ink and wrote down the words that were spoken. So this is a discussion of that first attempt by the council to capture every sermon. Ananda was foremost in memorization, remember. There were others, and for different sutras they were brought in, but Ananda was the one who kicked it off and recited word for word the sermons that Shakyamuni had preached. And while he did so, "This is what I heard," it prefaces every sutra as his memorization of those sermons, right? Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, spoken by Bodhisattva Manjushri within the 100-year period after Shakyamuni's death. So it's no new thing. Don't let people tell you that Nichiren invented this. He did not. Nichiren tells you right here, and he's told us before. It's not his invention, right? Namu is our reverence and respect for and compliance with the law. The law, Myoho Renge Kyo. Myoho Renge Kyo, the pinnacle of Shakyamuni's teachings, which, by being the pinnacle, stands aloft on top of all of his bodies of teaching. It is precisely because all the benefits represented by the 8 volumes and 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra are contained within the 5 characters that the Bodhisattva Manjushri recited them. The Venerable Ananda responded by saying, "Yes, indeed." And the 12,000 voice hearers, the 80,000 great bodhisattvas, and all the various other listeners from the 2 worlds and the 8 groups, since they agreed with what they had heard previously, signified their assent. I think because there's so much to gain, to glean from this letter, I'm going to end part 1 there. Part 2 will start with Tendai Chiche wrote about the 5 characters of Myoho Renge Kyo in 10 volumes. I have some of those translations here. Tendai was an amazing scholar. But for now, with part 1, I want to really drive home the way that we use this mandala, use our voices, use our eyes and our ears to focus our clear and repetitive chanting of Myoho Renge Kyo is what our mind should be focused on, as well as this visual, and everything else will come without effort. If you practice to focus yourself on the characters of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo with a steady rhythm and a loud voice, as loud as you can in your environment, but in a nice, steady, robust way, with a good posture, in a place dedicated for that purpose, so there's no distractions, you will find your Buddha mind will instantiate very quickly. And all of those other concerns simply won't be there. If they start to show up in your mind, refocus yourself on that mandala. If your eyes are wandering, which is fine, it's your mandala. You can wander all over it. But when you hear other voices coming in your head while you're trying to practice, go back to the characters Myoho. Focus your attention there. Whether it's the little caned mark from Myo that connects it to Ho, pick a spot and just force yourself to find Buddha there, to direct your Daimoku there. Your distractions will fall away. But if you focus your mind on getting rid of the distractions, you'll never get there. Because that is the form of your samsaric attachment. Follow? And with all that, I will see you in part 2. I'm really impressed by your practice, listening to these videos, watching them. Don't forget, you can listen. You can just download them as podcasts, the Buddhahood podcast, right? Wherever you get your podcasts. The podcasts seem to be very popular. Lots of downloads. I can see why, because it's easier to listen to a podcast and be doing other things in our lives today. We have so many balls in the air, right, that it's hard to sit down for a long time and listen and watch a video. I will leave some videos running on YouTube while I do other things in the house and just leave them, so I use them like podcasts. But you can actually download them so you can record them, listen to them in your car, whatever you're doing, right? Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much. Georgina, thank you so much for the recent donation. You guys on Patreon, you're all awesome. John, you're steady as a rock. I really appreciate all of you guys. I can't even name all of you now. We're starting to collect some steam. Our Sangha is growing. It's really amazing. And I'm doing work on the school all the time, trying to complete it to a stage where I can really use it as a gathering place. And always keeping this content going. You all know YouTube is it's a wonderful thing, but it's not free. And so there are many costs incurred in that. So all of you who can support, even one-time donations, are so much appreciated. And with all of that, blah, 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 I can't wait to get to part 2 of this Go Show. It's fascinating. You guys stay healthy, be kind, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Hey, thank you for being here. Did you know there's a third way you can help support this channel? And it won't cost you a cent. Yep. If you are not able to be a patron on Patreon or use the PayPal me at .com at Sifu Sylvain because you don't have the financial fortune to help support this channel right now, you, as I say, always support this channel by watching, but you can also help us grow so that maybe one day we can get over 10,000 subscribers and YouTube will grace us with monetization. It's not a lot, but if you can make sure you're subscribed and share a video like a simple one, just go into the search criteria and type monk, and you'll have a video that'll come up that's been up for years about what is a monk. It's called monk, who, how, where, something like that. That might be a great introduction to somebody who doesn't understand what a monk is to begin with. It's a tool. Use this channel as a tool to help you with your bodhisattva practice, and share a video to somebody who you think, oh, I know somebody who'll benefit from watching this. And in that way, you can help us grow. And that's a really good way to help your practice along as well. So just wanted to drop that in on you in case that's something that you might find useful. Take care of yourself again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.